This is fantastic. We've talked about recently billionaire Mark Cuban, Mavericks guy, and Shark Tank guy. And he is a very avid supporter of Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign, which is an interesting perspective given his success in business and him being a billionaire and being someone that ordinarily Trump may get along with, but very much not politically. And that's interesting in the takes he delivers. I'll play for you a few different examples from different shows, starting with Cuban going on to Fox News and just taking over the show for himself, delivering succinct and accurate points. Take a look.
Harris, and she argues, is that hers are fewer and not as devastating as the president's. Mark Cuban agrees with her, the billionaire businessman, joining us right now. Mark, you argue that, and it's always good to have you, you argue that Donald Trump's are particularly, I think you used the word insane. What did you mean by that?
Yep. Well, first of all, strategic tariffs aren't bad. So if a company's trying to dump, or a country's trying to dump in the United States and we have a manufacturer there, tariff him, that's great. But across the board tariffs, 10 or 20% is just inflationary. It's a tax on the American consumer. But to make matters even worse, and what's truly insane, when you threaten a legendary company like John Deere with a 200% tariff if they move, but only a 10 or 20% tariff on China, what you're doing is you're making it easy for the Chinese competitors to take business away from John Deere. That is the definition of insane.
A lot of your business colleagues say the definition of insane is supporting Kamala Harris, yet you do. You're a smart, savvy businessman. You came from nothing to be a multi-billionaire, so you're pretty good at what you do. What do you see in her that you don't see in Donald Trump?
I think she's thorough. If you look at Donald, right, when he talks about his policies, they're very impetuous, they're impulsive, they're set to match whatever's happening at a rally. Whereas with the Harris campaign and Kamala herself, she's very, very thorough. She's very precise. Her team.
And I'll stop that one there. But this is a point I reflected on in a different segment that he made. I haven't heard too many people making this point. It's very interesting that you really do rely on proposals in written form by his campaign to get clarification on what the heck Trump's talking about. Allies of his, surrogates of his, trying to sane wash what it is that Trump's saying. But Trump is really bad at thoughtfully explaining the specifics of any of his policies. We just watched in Trump Tower press conference, him getting asked about both Ukraine and Gaza, and on both of them just saying, oh, those need to be done. Those need to be wrapped up. Oh, we need peace. Those need to be done. And then someone said, well, can you outline what that means? He went, no, I'm not going to do that for you. That on foreign policy, on his tariff plans, he just starts blurting out. Like yesterday, what was referenced and what will be referenced in this next clip as well is Trump saying he may have to hit John Deere with a 200% tariff. And it causes a situation that you don't see similarly on the Harris side, where his surrogates, supporters of his, have to be the ones trying to make that sound rational because Trump can't. Whereas Harris can just explain, as we watched in the MSNBC interview, her own proposals. We'll be right back to the video just really quickly. If you're not already, I would appreciate you clicking that subscribe button. We are really close to 1 million subscribers. You can help us get there. Easy, free way. And then we do have merch at lukebeasleymerch.com with Harris as a promo code. You can get free shipping. Super cool election-themed merch. Check it out. Back to the video. Here's more of Mark Cuban.
But to your point, right, what is it, 75% of manufacturers have under 20 employees, right? There's like 4,000 companies that have more than 5 manufacturing companies. Donald Trump is trying to come in with a hammer and say, right, you're the nail. I'm going to hit you with a 200% tariff, John Deere. Kamala Harris is saying, I'm going to give you incentives to manufacture more. Which do you think is going to work better with companies? Do you want to be underneath a hammer? Because when you put a 200% tariff on John Deere and only a 10 or 20% tariff on their Chinese competitors, their Chinese competitors are now less expensive than John Deere. And it's not so easy. We saw what happened with Carrier, right? When in 2016, they said, if you move down, right, we're going to tax you more, 35% tariff back then. And what Carrier did, they gamed the system, right? They just fired different employees.
And for context, pretty sure Mexico was the country that certain supply chains, or a certain part of the John Deere supply chain, was being moved to, which is why Trump blurted that out. But it is also applicable for Cuban to say, that being on CNBC. You saw Fox News. We're about to get to CNN. But really good at making these points, similar to how we say about Tim Walz, in a way that just sort of feels like we're just talking, right? Doesn't feel super political, but just feels like he's giving his take as a guy. But it's also correct to say that Trump approaches with the philosophy of all Trump has is a hammer, and so everything looks like a nail. That sort of approach. He's just looking for any type of nail to use his hammer on. And that's what tariffs are to him. It's like he had just learned about one economic term. And then he just says tariffs, or doing everything's tariffs. Energy production, even though he doesn't seem to acknowledge that we're producing at record amounts right now, and tariffs. He gets asked about childcare, tariffs. It's pretty sad. And no, it's not the correct approach. And actually, before I show more clips, that's being shown by this. And I want to say, as Cuban pointed out, there are uses for tariffs, of course. But the simple and irrational approach Trump at least is floating of across the board imports, or at least across the board for Chinese imports, 10, 20%, I don't know, make it 60. He just throws out different numbers. And then, I heard something about John Deere, 200%. That is not something that would yield good economic results. CNN reports that Trump's promises would spike inflation and wipe out jobs, according to a study. This is by the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Former President Donald Trump has promised to attack the United States affordability crisis by imposing immense tariffs. I'm just picturing Trump going, what? I heard this term, tariff? Is tariff the word? All right, I'm going to use on everything now. Carrying out unprecedented deportations and even influencing interest rate decisions. However, a new analysis finds that the Republican presidential nominee's plans for tariff deportations and the Federal Reserve would not only fail to solve inflation, they would make it much worse. The Trump agenda would cause weaker economic growth, higher inflation, lower employment, according to a working paper released Thursday by the Peterson Institute for International Economics. We find that, ironically, despite his making the foreigners pay rhetoric, this package of policies does more damage to the U.S. economy than any other in the world. Something that we knew, but more and more, the 400 plus economists that came out in favor of Harris and this and many other analyses are bolstering the idea that if you're concerned with the economy, as we all are, then Harris is your candidate, not Trump. Then you have Andrew Ross Sorkin, a CNBC anchor, saying this on MSNBC.
If you really listened to her yesterday talk about taxes, who's going to try to balance the budget or get closer to that? She is. She talked about higher corporate taxes. Clearly, she talked about higher taxes on the very wealthy. Now, that may make the very wealthy frustrated or upset, but she also said something very interesting. She said, I'm not against them being wealthy. I'm not against success. I just want to figure out a way to tax the system in a fair way. And I think that to some degree, resonated. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some selfish folks out there who are super greedy, who don't even like the idea of it. But I just think that when you start to think about what is the more practical approach to all of these things, she definitely laid out her case, and I think it landed. If you really
And this was him reflecting on an economic speech that was delivered by Harris. I did mean to play this first, but here's now the CNN clip.
Donald Trump really is the one that should be worried. When it comes to the economy, she was 20, 30 points behind 45 days ago. Now the trend is her friend and she's catching up. And I think her speech today went a long way to really convey to voters that she is pro-business, that she wants to partner with businesses, that she wants to incent businesses. Look at Donald Trump. He's threatening one of the most legendary companies in America, John Deere, with 200% tariffs that would make buying from China cheaper than buying from John Deere. That's insane. So he's looking to just beat down American companies, while Vice President Harris is saying, look, we want to work with you. I want to talk to you. I want to learn from you. I want to incent you to continue to grow. I want to help you incorporate new technologies like AI and blockchain and others so that we can compete better. I'm a big fan, and I think as more people learn that she truly is pro-business and about more of her policies, I think that 39% will grow considerably.
it's interesting how, because of Trump's impulsiveness, lack of knowledge, I guess, and mental simplicity, we'll call it, he is shooting himself in the foot over and over again, causing a situation where business leaders, way more than you expect, because normally Republicans are willing to say, well, cut your taxes, even more big business, even big business leaders, more than at least I've expected, have come out in favor of Harris, or at least not supported Trump, because he's so all over the place. So then Harris is put in this unique position where she can discuss for small businesses and for big businesses how she'll incentivize business in the United States, how she'll promote it, how she'll uplift that, while still proposing a bunch of things to address income inequality. Still propose ways to invest in the communities that need it. That's the big part of her plan. But because she has a coherent plan that doesn't benefit the rich as much, but as we know, when we have a good economy because of good policies that often invest in communities that need it, that does end up trickling up, to use a phrase, and people can do very well. But even some of the wealthiest are actually in favor of Harris, just because at least the economy at large would do a lot better. At least someone who has the power of a president would be governing rationally instead of the mess that Trump is. Because a certain level of instability, even if it comes with some tax cuts, isn't advantageous to even big businesses. Then you have this, posted by Steven Ratner. Real GDP has outpaced the pre-COVID projections. So GDP adjusted for inflation. You can see that the dark green dotted line here is what the Congressional Budget Office projected our economy would be doing in terms of GDP before we knew there was going to be an economic collapse. Okay, so when we thought things were just going to keep chugging along well, we predicted a certain trajectory. We now, after experiencing that whole crisis in between, are doing so well that we're outpacing that projection, as well as the other projections noted here. We're doing, when I say way better than anyone thought possible, this is what I mean. Our recovery has been stunning. And then just a little extra random Harris news. Mediaite reports Kamala Harris scores surprise endorsement from ex-commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. This is Stanley McChrystal, and he is the former commander of all U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan. And so given the huge attack line from Trump about Afghanistan, this brings with it a certain level of credibility to Harris's argument that she's the right person for the job on foreign policy. Let me know what you thought of Mark Cuban. Quite the Harris surrogate now, in the comments, and support the show. Get the members only bonus show by clicking that join button below.